Okay, so the first step of this journey, if we're just going to jump in to Jesus's and his disciples, right as they lead up to the crucifixion, the first marker on the path is the triumphal entry. And I think there's a couple key things that might be helpful to this part of the story. So if you are a church person, then you that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. This was a very primitive time in history, so the ground would have been very dirty. There would have been animal feces on the ground. It was a messy roads to travel back then. So in order to honor this king or this leader that was coming into Jerusalem on the donkey, the people laid down their coats and their cloaks and palm branches. They used palm branches to both honor him, but also to lay down a pathway to make a clean, honoring, beautiful pathway for this leader to enter. And I think it's really important for a couple reasons for us to pause at that. So first of all, that there was joy, excitement, and pride during this parade, this triumphal entry. And there's a couple things that I think we need to just pause and think about. The 12 disciples that are with Jesus, that have been walking with him, that have been seeing all of his miracles, ministering with him, being empowered as his followers, they were like ragtag group of guys. Okay. And something that my pastor spoke about today that I had never really thought about was they didn't make the cut initially. And what that means is that Jewish young men were trained up. They were to memorize the Torah. They were under some type of discipleship with the highest honor that your family would have is that one of your children became a priest. So, and in that culture, it was men. So that one of your boys would become a priest. So it's important to realize that the 12 guys that are hanging out with Jesus, they had other trades. They had other professions that they had walked in, learned, and developed in, and they were not priests. So as they had become to following this rabbi, Jesus, this was an honor. This was something that they didn't make the cut when they were younger, but they were making the cut now. So all of the prophecy, all of the Bible that they knew, they thought the King of the Jews was going to do a reckoning with Rome in the way that they had experienced in the past, which would have been a war, and it would have been a defeat of that power. So this triumphal entry for the disciples was high. It was for their group and all that they had been doing. We can only imagine that they thought they were going to be defeating Rome, and that their God or their prince or their king was going to come in and annihilate all the wrong that was happening to the Jewish people under the Roman Empire. It's really important for us to understand that, because Jesus being led in on a colt, riding in on a colt, was actually something that had a larger meaning in their culture. And the meaning was that if a king came on a donkey, it meant he was coming in a submissive way. He was coming in as a servant leader. And so Jesus was modeling something that was in their culture, as well as something that was who he was and what we all know he would do, and the way that he would end up saving the world. So I just think today, if we want to pause on an emotional place, we're in the place of the story where there's joy. There's excitement, there's celebration, and there's even pride. And I want to encourage you to think about where you find yourself this Easter season. Do you find yourself in those emotions? If you don't, take a moment, pause and think about the last time you have been in the spirit of joy and celebration and excitement, and meditate on that. Think about what that was and what was going on. And then we are going to continue to build on that emotion. But if you're not there right now, take a moment to think about, what's the last time you felt real pride? And I don't mean pride as in pride about to fall, but in the good pleasure of a job well done and the success that comes with that. Or when have you felt celebration? When have you felt joy? When have you felt a real sense of a contented happiness in your life? Take a moment to think about that. And I look forward to us building on that emotion tomorrow.